This is The Public Interest. I'm Malika Ramsey. Thank you very much for joining us for another edition. Of course, as always, on the panel is the President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, His Excellency Brigadier David Granger. Welcome back, sir.
Thank you, Malika.
And joining us this week are two journalists, one from the National Communications Network, NCN, Mr. Paul Moore. Welcome, Paul.
Welcome, thanks.
And Mr. Leonard Gildarie from Kaieteur News. Welcome, Leonard.
Thank you, Malika.
Now, today's edition is designed to focus on Guyana's territorial integrity. Of course, with that said, Mr. President, you've recently addressed the National Assembly and you've declared that as far as Guyana is concerned, the border takes first place. What's Guyana's next move to address the issues of Suriname and Venezuela, renewing, in a sense, claims to our territory?
On the positive side, we will continue to pursue a peaceful course through the United Nations, and we aim at a juridical settlement. We will continue to engage our neighbors, both Venezuela and Suriname, so that they could understand our positions better. And we will continue to engage the international organization in the sense that we've already started with the Caribbean community. We've spoken with UNASUR. We've spoken with other countries that we met at the United Nations General Assembly in September. Next month we'll be going to the Commonwealth Heads of Government. As you know, there are 53 states in the Commonwealth. So we will continue to pursue a diplomatic line and seek a peaceful solution to the controversy. On what we call the negative side, we hope to persuade or convince our two neighbors not to send gunboats into our waters again. I mean, both Suriname and Venezuela sent gunboats into our water. There's no way to go about diplomacy in the 21st century. So we hope to prevent them from making extravagant statements and taking offensive action against us. We are aware that as recently as last week, the Venezuelan ambassador in Toronto, in Ottawa, sent a strong letter to the CEO of Guyana Goldfields. We hope to convince our two neighbors to stop taking action that could derail peaceful solution to this crisis.
All right, thank you, sir. I'd like to give both gentlemen an opportunity now to pose questions on this set topic, territorial integrity, beginning with you, Leonard.
Mr. President, in the current situation, as bilateral relations with Venezuela dead, we had a very good oil for rice deal, and I understand that Venezuela hasn't definitively said that it is ended, but the rice agreement is until November the 30th. Is it dead?
No deal is dead. We have not been officially informed about Venezuela. I can say for sure that we did send a boat for a vessel for petroleum 2 months ago, and it came back empty. We did see the news releases that Venezuela has entered into an agreement for the purchase of rice from Suriname. That is entirely a matter for the Venezuelan government, but we have not been officially informed. But we have always pursued cordial relations with Venezuela, economic and cultural relations with Venezuela, despite the territorial claim, which is 50 years old. As you know, there's a Venezuelan presented a sports hall, they built a center called the Hugo Chavez Center, and we've had cordial bilateral relations in other fields, economic and other fields. But as far as Guyana is concerned, we intend to maintain cordial relations with our neighbors. Nothing is dead, and we are aware of the situation affecting the paddy farmers particularly, and of course the rice millers. And we are seeking new markets. Venezuela, I think, took a little over 30% of our rice production. And we would like to keep the market, but we would like to search for other markets too, to assure our farmers that we are on their side. Similarly with Suriname, we are intent on maintaining cordial relations with Suriname. Up to last week, as you know, a team from the National Assembly visited the National Assembly of Suriname. So there's no need to feel that cordiality will be thrown out of the window because of these territorial conflicts. They've existed for 50 years. And as things go, you know, we like to bring an early conclusion to them, but they will go on for a little while longer. But we can be friends.
Sir, given the global village that we're in, don't you think a strategic media social strategy should be employed to bring better awareness on this territorial issue? And you mentioned too that you know, the Venezuelan government, or Mr. Maduro, is seemingly afraid of the judicial process. Do you think it's afraid, or is it he's embarrassed about the frivolity of the whole issue?
Well, maybe I shouldn't use either word, fear or embarrassment, because I don't know what's in his head, and I don't want to speak for him. But on your first question, I would feel yes. As you know, one of the most popular songs, if you go to any gathering of Guyanese, and you sing that song, Not a Blade of Grass, most Guyanese of maybe your age, maybe not Leonard, but most Guyanese of your age would know that song by, in all the words, by heart. So I do not feel that there is a want of patriotism on the part of Guyanese, but I would agree with you that more needs to be done, and this is what I attempted to do in the National Assembly, bring the entire Guyanese nation up to date with the developments, literally up to last week, up to this week. More can be done so that people would know. People, I think, sometimes they get turned off, they get bored. Oh, they feel that the situation hasn't changed in the last 50 years. But the situation is very much alive, because you get publications from those two countries and they show Guyana's territory. This is something that is taught in schools. This is something that the politicians seem to promote. I mean, when you look at the behavior of Venezuela, they've visited almost every single country from Cuba to Trinidad over the last 3 months, telling them the same story, but they never mention that they have evidence that would overturn the Tribunal Award of 1899. They always speak of Geneva Agreement, and we showed you, I can give you copies of the Geneva Agreement, and maybe they should be publicized. I agree with you fully. I agree with you fully. I couldn't agree more.
Is there, Mr. President, is there a lot of talks that is ongoing diplomatically between Guyana and Venezuela? There seems to be some criticisms in some circles that the rhetoric, that the tone between the two countries, it should be a little more friendly. What is your feeling about this?
My feeling is that the decision by the Venezuelan administration to recall the ambassador contributed to the breakdown in communication. We should not do that. They refused to grant agreement to our nominee for a long time, Mrs. Cheryl Miles. I understand that that is being done now, but she has not yet been appointed. And the ambassador for Venezuela has been returned to Georgetown. So in terms of dialogue, I think that's where it starts. As far as Suriname is concerned, I actually went to the inauguration of President Bouterse, and he greeted me very warmly there, and when I was elected, he greeted me warmly, and I reciprocated when he was elected. So we have to work together for the next 5 years, and I intend to engage with Suriname. I only met President Maduro in the presence of the United Nations Secretary General, and I don't mind meeting him. I don't mind inviting him to Georgetown again to take the dialogue further. But I agree with you that we need to continue to speak to each other. We need to maintain people-to-people contact among the parliamentarians, among the ordinary citizens. But we must bear in mind that very important elections are coming up in Suriname in a few weeks' time, Venezuela, a few weeks' time. And I would say that the situation in that country is perhaps unsettled, and it is quite possible, without being a psychoanalyst, that President Maduro is reacting to changes which are affecting, changes and challenges affecting the Venezuelan economy at the present time. And I'd like to leave it at that.
Gentlemen, we still have some more time on that segment, so you
Yes.
have about 2 more questions.
Sir, Your Excellency, trending on the ground is much congratulations to you and your diplomatic skill in handling the territorial issue. I myself want to congratulate you. You have given a perspective on your assumption to office with regard to a new perspective, economic perspective for the embassies. Tell us a little bit more how you see the embassies advancing the whole territorial issue and as well the economic mandate of Guyana.
Well, as you can see from the stance that Venezuela has taken, it is very important for investors to feel confident that the investment will be safe. And one of the most dangerous aspects of the Venezuelan behavior is the fear that they would generate some panic among potential investors. So coming back to your question, I did say that economic diplomacy would be at the forefront of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs agenda for the next 5 years. But at the same time, I would like to feel that we haven't appointed all of the diplomats. In fact, most of the diplomats have not been appointed. But I'd like to feel that despite the territorial claims, we'll be able to advance our internal economic agenda in terms of selling Guyanese products. As you said just now, we need to look for new rice markets. We need to look for persons who are prepared to invest in downstream wood processing, gold refining, tourism, ecotourism. So the foreign ministry will be involved in that type of economic diplomacy, bringing investors in, but investors want a safe country. And we're working on that agenda as well.
If I may.
Yes, please.
In the same vein, we have a young population, Mr. President, and you're talking about the appointment of new ambassadors. As a historian, you would know the likes of Forbes Burnham and Chetty Jagan and Rashid Jackson and all of them emerged in their late 30s, early 40s. Don't you think it's time to create a younger diplomatic corps?
Yes, we have to do that, and it is something I've discussed with the Foreign Ministry, in particular the restructuring of the Foreign Service Institute. We need to create a younger cadre of diplomats, but we need to develop an intelligent cadre of diplomats, educated and intelligent cadre of diplomats. And you can't fake experience. Experience is important, but at the same time, you need to bring in younger diplomats who can take over from the more experienced diplomats sooner rather than later. But the important thing is that they should be educated and trained, and they should understudy the seniors now. So yes, that will be coming, but I would like to get the educational basis restructured before we rush ahead. We have trained a lot of diplomats in different countries, in Brazil, I think in Chile, but we need to have our own institute here. And, that is being done. I'm sure the Minister of Foreign Affairs is paying attention to that. So that whenever, as you know, I'd also proposed the establishment of a public service staff college, so that when any young person comes off the street, comes out of school, he or she goes into the public service staff college, and then would be streamed to go into a particular ministry. Because I would regard the foreign ministry being specialized. It is something that you need to spend your whole life, your whole career. You know, you can't just move from Ministry of Health to Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And so people need to be trained to do this sort of diplomatic work. It's hard work. I've been with the diplomats in New York during United Nations General Assembly, and they work. They're understaffed, underpaid, and overworked. I mean, I would say so, but they're trained and they're committed. That's very important.
Leonard, the final question in this segment goes to you.
Sure, Mr. President. Suriname had signaled some time back bridging the Quarantine River. How advanced are those talks? Because it was signaled that there's some kind of communication between the two countries.
I cannot say it will involve international foreign financing. We took a very long time to arrive at the Kanawaima, and part of the problem had arisen out of maybe a failure to deal with the sovereignty issue. Once you speak of a bridge, the sovereignty issue will arise again. What are Guyana's rights? What are Suriname's rights? And I would not like that issue to prevent the meetings of the two people across the Quarantine River. The river should not be seen as a barrier, it should be seen as a bridge, literally. It should be seen as a bridge between people who have similar conditions, similar circumstances. We both arose out of colonial experience. Our foreparents were indentured laborers or enslaved Africans and indigenous people. There's so many similarities. The river should not divide us. When you look at the situation in Europe, I mean, the worst world wars were fought in Europe, but now they have a EU. France has a tragedy, and the German chancellor flies over there in a matter of minutes. So I would like to see that type of solidarity existing between Suriname and Guyana. So I look forward to the bridge coming on stream, and I hope that during my tenure as president, we don't have obstacles or challenges because of the sovereignty issue. The quotation I gave in Parliament was from President Venetian in 1995, 20 years ago. And we must not presume that the border issue could simply be erased. It's a serious issue for Suriname, and I made it clear yesterday it's a serious issue for Guyana. We have to settle. We can't sweep it under the carpet, bridge or no bridge.
Thank you, Mr. President. The first question on the next segment goes for you, Paul Moore.
Sir, while in opposition and even on the campaign trail, you spoke to the whole issue of degradation in sectors and functions. Now that you're in government and you have seen the extent of the national condition, how challenging is it? And is there anything more that the nation need to be told?
Degradation in what respect are you speaking of?
Well, I'm speaking the main sectors that drive the pillar of the economy. We're seeing emerging, for example, in the rice sector, the sugar sector, so many problems that were hidden and covered. And generally you're looking at broadening the whole mandate in order to have job creation and so forth. So I'm trying to get a general picture, and the nation is trying to get a general picture of your view now that you're in government, and what changes or perspectives you have to put forward.
Well, it's early days yet, and we are still discovering things, even though we have a very clear vision and we know where we want to go. I would like to start by maybe looking at the education sector, because I think that is the basis of so many things which have gone wrong. That is the basis of reconstruction. We need intelligent human beings, educated human beings, who are going to bring about the change that you're talking about. And that has been my personal focus. As you know, earlier this week I was in President's College, and I saw some of the issues. I wouldn't call it degradation. There obviously has been an element of underfunding and maybe a change in the whole philosophy of what that institution is all about. So we need to pay attention to education reform and restructuring first, so that we can start to produce children, graduates from all those primary and secondary schools, who can lead this change, this thrust, not only, as you mentioned, in foreign affairs, but throughout the country. More engineers. I made this announcement on Monday at President's College. More science, more technology, more people who can come out there building roads, more architects, technical people. Second problem that we have, of course, is the public service itself. And as you know, one of my earliest engagements was with the public service, with the senior public servants, and we are still working on the establishment of a public service staff college. But we would like to see a generation of public servants who could give the quality support to their ministers and their ministries, which can help to bring about that change. We also need to deal with the employment issues. You're quite right. When you look at the country as a whole, you can see that over the last 20, maybe longer, 20 years or longer, some of the sectors have underperformed, some have been damaged. It's like living in a house. People can go on living in a house, but sooner or later you have to deal with wood ants, you have to deal with the rot, you have to deal with the leaks. And it is just our challenge now to deal with all of those at the same time. But we cannot go on as we did before. We have to fix the schools, we have to look after teachers, we have to ensure that children get to school. We have to make sure that they have textbooks. And the dropout rate, for example, as I mentioned before, it's about 4,000 or so a year. And we have to deal with all of those issues. Many children come out of school, we can't read, write, count, or spell properly. So it will take a bit of time, but we are working on those challenges. And it is my view that we have a better understanding now than before we went into office.
A new role for the Learning Channel, as given you speaking about education?
No, just extension. Right now, it's just a matter of ensuring that every part of the country is covered. And we have to look at the agenda. I have not done so myself. As you know, our 50th anniversary of independence is coming up in a few months' time. People have to be aware of the importance of independence, the importance of thinking independently. I would like to see that issues such as the territorial problem are understood. I'd like more Guyanese children to have an understanding of the geography, of the flora, the fauna, the history. There are lots of things which I would feel that children in a developed country are aware of at primary or secondary school level that many Guyanese are not aware of. Even when I was speaking with the Indigenous Peoples at Indigenous Peoples Day, I mentioned some things. People go into the hinterland and work for months, sometimes years, without understanding the language of the people among whom they're working. So there are many things we have to deal with, and I feel that the Learning Channel would contribute because people have to start that type of education as toddlers and in primary and secondary schools.
Leonard?
Mr. President, the Auditor General report of 2014 is out and spoke of some alarming things. I think yesterday we saw $63 billion was granted in tax exemptions, and if we take that into account that our budget of last year was $221 billion, is this something that's worrying the administration, or what steps are taken to review the process or some of the systems that we had in place in the past?
Well, first of all, we are aware of the problem. We have received reports from the various ministries, and this is something we complained about when APNU and AFC were in the opposition. So it is not unanticipated. But in putting things right, first of all, it's not a matter of a witch hunt, it's not a matter of persecution. We want to find, we want to get the evidence.
Right.
Because when a waiver is granted, it may be granted because of nepotism or corruption on the one hand. On the other hand, there might be good reasons.
Right.
So I don't want to make a blanket statement and say that waivers will be stopped, because we have, I myself have made an announcement about the Food for the Poor, which has built 3,000 houses. This is not something I could ignore, and I have given a commitment, but all of them will be examined on a case-by-case basis. And we intend to reduce the amount of waivers. Many people have applied for waivers already, and the Minister of Finance is going to make some recommendations, but it is unsustainable. If you have a policy, enforce the policy. And if the policy is to grant waivers to religious organizations or to certain categories of non-governmental organizations, let us put a schedule, and that's, people outside of the schedule, no waivers. That is how we intend to proceed. But I agree with you that the figure that was stated in the Auditor General's report is unacceptable, and the Minister of Finance is aware of that.
Mr. President, local government elections, again, we have a huge, large youth population. Local government elections was now held for over 25 years, and a lot of the youth are uneducated about the process. Do you see a role for civil society, and is there any consideration to possibly give any subventions to civil society bodies to help in the education process for local government elections?
There is a role for civil society, and there's even a role for international organization. As you know, Mr. Glenn Bradbury was here, and at one stage an attempt was made to deem him persona non grata. But a lot of the work he was involved in was public information. I agree with you, local government elections are going to be more complex than national and general and regional elections, and there needs to be much more education. my own partnership and party, APNU and the PNC, did start public education, public information campaign since 2013. And you're quite right, it needs to be done all over again. More young people are going to be coming onto the voters' roll, the list of electors, and they need to know the complexity. So yes, I would agree. As you know, the date is now more or less been set for March, although this time last year I was picketing the then president, calling for local government elections to be held as soon as possible. But we have been informed that that is the earliest possible time. We are going to have 4 more tongues, so Guyana will finally have 10 tongues, and people need to have new boundaries, and all that work is being done. So no one is idle, but I would agree that there needs to be a lot more public information for younger persons who are going to be voting not only in local government elections, but they're going to be voting for the first time in their lives. So the time is already short, and I expect that time will be used in ensuring that there's better public information.
And I was asking about a consideration in terms of funding to advance same.
I don't know that apart from the one I mentioned, the foreign agency, that we need to fund other organizations. It is desirable, but I would feel that as things stand, it is a role for the Guyana Election Commission. And I know that maybe Guyana Human Rights Association and other NGOs could do work, but they should try to collaborate rather than going off on their own, because we're singing from the same song sheet here. And GCOM has already put out fairly authoritative guidelines for local government elections. And I would say let it come through GCOM, and the NGOs can assist in the dissemination. It could assist in seminars and outreach. But I would ask that we pay attention to the GCOM explanation of the procedures to be followed, and NGOs could maybe drink the milk of GCOM's information strategy in the short term.
Gentlemen, we only have a few minutes left, and because Paul has had 2 extensions, I'd like to give the opportunity to Leonard.
Mr. President, we would have been receiving a growing number of complaints, Kaieteur News, that is, but the economy seems to be slowing down. Is this the assessment of the present administration? And if that is so, is there any measures? Are there any measures in place to jumpstart the economy again?
First of all, it is very difficult to accept that the economy slowed down in 5 months. The economy was slowing down before. I mean, and we need to look at the structure of the economy. And as I've often said, you've heard me, I'm sure, that we're sort of cohabiting with 6 sisters, for the last 100 years, sugar, rice, gold, bauxite, diamonds, and timber, fish. There are structural problems. And as long as we continue to rely on those 6 sisters, we are going to be susceptible, we're going to be vulnerable, we're going to suffer from the fluctuations which will always affect commodity prices. Gold prices are down. There's nothing that the Guyana government can do to maintain gold prices at the levels that they were 2 years ago. So all we can think of, quite frankly, is restructuring the economy in the middle and the long terms to shift the focus away from these 6 sisters and start doing more, I would call, downstream work, more value-added work, more agro-processing. Instead of trying to export a boatload of cassava or plantain, let us get into plantain chips, let's get into cassava chips, let's get into breadfruit chips, let's get into fruit juices. Instead of exporting huge pontoons of timber, let us start producing veneers and floors and doors and windows, famous Demerara windows. Instead of people smuggling gold out of the country by the pound, to Curacao and Suriname, let us start to produce some of the finest jewelry on the continent. Let us export some of the gems and so on. But we need to have the type of economy guided by entrepreneurs, not just traders, guided by entrepreneurs who invest in downstream products, who invest in manufacturing. Right now, I would say the manufacturing sector is sluggish, and that has been one of the problems. But when you look at the economy, do not expect sudden shifts, because the economy is suffering from chronic or structural malformations, and these are going to affect us for a long time until we get off of those six sisters, until we start manufacturing, until we start exporting more products. Right now, we are subject to whatever the world market tells us about sugar, rice, bauxite, gold, and quite frankly, these commodities have been attracting very low prices in the world market in recent times.
And unfortunately, on that note, we are out of time. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, President of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, His Excellency Brigadier David Granger. Thank you, Paul Moore from NCN, the National Communications Network, and thank you, Leonard from Kaieteur News. I am Malika Ramsey. Thanks for watching.